Welcome to the Mysteries Abound podcast, everyone. This is your host, Paul, and this is episode 84. This show is entitled The Doll's Eyes Plant. But first up today, a story from the blogs.smithsonianmag.com website. The story behind the first ransom note in American history. And this is written by Carrie Hagan. One day last March, Bridget Flynn, a school librarian who lives in Philadelphia, was searching for an old family drawing to print on the invitations to her daughter Rebecca's bridal shower. As she and Rebecca rummaged through the several generations of family artefacts, letters, photographs, an envelope of hair cuttings she kept in plastic bins in her basement, they found a stack of small envelopes tied together with a black shoelace. "Oh, honey, these are love letters," Flynn said. Rebecca untied them and began reading the first one. "Mr. Ross, be not uneasy. Your son Charlie Broster will be all right. We has got him, and no powers on earth can deliver out our hand." "Mum, these are ransom letters," Rebecca said. Flynn went through the rest of the stack with her husband, David Meckerton, a research consultant at the University of Pennsylvania. They counted a total of 22 letters, all of them addressed to Christian Ross. Kidnappers had taken his 4-year-old son, whose full name was Charles Brewster Ross, and demanded $20,000 for his return. Meckerton Googled Christian Ross and found that in 1876, Ross published a memoir about the kidnapping. The memoir, available online, includes facsimiles of several of the letters. As he compared the handwriting in the images to the documents that lay before him, Meckerton realised he held America's first known kidnapping notes. The letters represented a direct link into a disappearance that had remained unsolved for 139 years. The question was how they had ended up in his basement and where they might lead. On July the 1st, 1874, 2 Ross sons were taken from their family's front lawn in Germantown, a northwest Philadelphia neighbourhood. The kidnappers released Walter, aged 5, for reasons unclear. When Charlie failed to return home by nightfall, Christian Ross, a dry goods merchant, feared the worst. But he struggled to get police help. Philadelphia's force, only about 30 years old, had no precedent for investigating a kidnapping. At Central Police Headquarters, inside Independence Hall, officers told Ross that drunks had probably taken Charlie and would return him once they had sobered up. 3 days later, the first ransom letter arrived at Ross's store in downtown Philadelphia. Somebody had written the message, written with errors in spelling, capitalisation and punctuation, in black ink and an unsteady hand. "You will have to pay us before you get him from us. And pay us a big cent too," the note read. "If you put the cops hunting for him, you is only defeating your own end." The second came 5 days later, stating the ransom amount. "This is the lever that moved the rock that hides him from you, $20,000. Not $1 less, impossible, impossible. You cannot get him without it." The sum of $20,000 in 1874 was the equivalent of about $400,000 today. With this demand, the letter writers recorded the first ransom kidnapping in US history. They told Christian Ross to correspond with them through the personal advertisements in the Philadelphia Public Ledger. Ross showed the letters to the police, who then rushed to make up for lost time. They advised him to refuse payment for fear it would inspire copycat crimes. And they posted handbills from Philadelphia to Trenton to alert the public to Charlie's disappearance. The press soon learned about the letters, and concerned parents, wanting to know if their children were in similar danger, demanded they be released. The authorities refused to publish them, but on July 24, the Mayor's office announced a $20,000 reward for information leading to the kidnappers. Telegraphs spread the word of the reward throughout the country and unleashed chaos. As the country struggled through Reconstruction, Americans united in a national manhunt for a common enemy. But the search also brought out con artists, do-gooders and conspiracy theorists who jumped at the chance to say that they had information about Charlie Ross. Private detectives competed with police. Spiritualists offered their services, and parents dressed up their children, boys and girls of every age, in the hope that they could pass as Charlie and capture the reward money. In early August, the chief of the Philadelphia police led a search of every building in the city. By then, the New York police had received a lead. Gil Mosher, a seasoned criminal greedy for the reward, told Superintendent George Walling that his brother William and a friend named Joseph Douglas fit the kidnappers' descriptions, as reported by Walter Ross and witnesses who had seen the men near the boys. Walling also learned that William Mosher's brother-in-law was a former NYPD officer named William Westervelt, who had been fired for graft. Walling offered to restore Westervelt's job if he could contact and spy on his brother-in-law. Westervelt agreed. But after contacting the kidnappers through his sister, he began acting as a double agent, informing the kidnappers of police activities. The New York and Philadelphia police departments searched together for William Mosher and Douglas, but did not release their names for fear of public interference. The search lasted for 5 months, during which time the kidnappers wrote 23 letters. Christian Ross's memoir contains the text of every letter except for one, number 5. He does not mention why, and this letter is also missing from Bridget Flynn's discovery. In December 1874, the 2 suspects died of gunshot wounds after a failed robbery attempt on Long Island. As he lay wounded in front of witnesses, Douglas confessed that he and Mosher had kidnapped Charlie Ross, and then died before saying anything more. After 2 months of tracking down leads, police turned their attention to William Westervelt. In the fall of 1875, a Philadelphia jury convicted him of complicity in Charlie Ross's kidnapping. He maintained his innocence, even as he served 7 years in Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary. Charlie Ross never returned home. During Westervelt's trial, Christian Ross estimated that more than 500,000 people had assisted in the search for Charlie. He told reporters that those helping him had distributed more than 700,000 flyers and investigated the stories of more than 600 children who resembled his son. Well into the 20th century, men came forward claiming to be Charlie Ross, but the Ross family did not accept any of their assertions. Christian and his wife Sarah spent the rest of their lives and money looking for their son. They both died of heart failure. Christian died in 1897 at age 73, and Sarah in 1912 at the age of 79. The 5 remaining Ross children did not welcome inquiries into Charlie's fate. After Bridget Flynn found the ransom letters, her husband contacted Alex Bartlett, an archivist at Historic Germantown, the local historical society. Bartlett compared the handwriting in the letters to that in the published facsimiles and said that the letters looked authentic, but he wondered about their provenance. Flynn's family has lived in northwest Philadelphia since the late 18th century. Her house is within walking distance of where her ancestors grew up in Germantown. Flynn knew that her grandmother, a born storyteller, was a careful collector who had left behind many family papers. Flynn took custody of them about a decade ago. The bins sat unexamined in her basement until last March. Along with the letters, Flynn found an original letterpress Lost poster imprinted with Charlie's image. Because of this pairing, she wonders if one of her forebears brought the Ross items together as an auction lot, but she still doesn't know for sure. Charlie's grandnephew, Chris Ross, a 9-term Pennsylvania state representative, says his parents' generation didn't talk about Charlie much, because the disappearance was a forbidden subject. The family, he says, had no knowledge that any family papers dating back to Christian Ross existed. James Butler, a Professor Emeritus of English at LaSalle University in Philadelphia, and a long-time local historian, has always thought how very odd it was that the Ransom letters hadn't surfaced. Their re-emergence now, he says, only adds to the mystery surrounding the Ross case. Why, one wonders, would the family ever part ways with their only lifeline to their child? David Bloom is a Vice President and head of the Rare Books, Maps and Manuscript Department at Freeman's Auctioneers and Appraisers, Philadelphia's oldest auction house. Throughout his 30-year career with Freeman's, Bloom has seen various pieces of Charlie Ross Americana come through its doors. First editions of Christian Ross's memoir, period reward posters and missing person flyers. But until David Meckerton approached him last spring, he had never heard that the Ransom letters might still exist. Bloom said he listened to Meckerton's description with scepticism, but agreed to examine the find because it seemed promising enough. When he did so, the paper looked and felt right, as did a quick comparison of the 4 published facsimiles to their physical counterparts. The handwriting matched, the smudges matched, and Bloom found it especially interesting that each letter had a light pencil mark at the top. Someone had numbered them. Bloom gave the Ransom letters an estimate of $3,000 to $5,000 and advised Flynn and Meckerton to offer them for sale in November, when Freeman's put it on its annual Pennsylvania sale. Historic Germantown received word that a collector was interested in obtaining the letters at auction and lending them to the society. Chris Ross visited the letters at Freeman's, but didn't want to own them because of a sadness for all the harm and trouble they caused in the family. Both Ross and the team at Historic Germantown wondered whether bidders would scramble to own a piece of an American first. The letters resulted in not only America's first recorded ransom kidnapping, but also a new state law. In 1875, Pennsylvania became the first state to change the crime of kidnapping from a misdemeanor to a felony. Freeman's held its Pennsylvania sale on November 14. The book's map and manuscript section started at noon and featured the Ross letters. Lot 632, near the end of the sale. The audience had winnowed to about 36 people. An online bidder bid first, starting at $1,500. 2 bidders then started a war that ended at $16,000. After paying an additional 25% premium fee, the winner claimed the letters for $20,000. The same sum, though hardly the same value, that the kidnappers had demanded. The buyer, who asked to have his name withheld, is the collector with interests in historic Germantown. My main goal in buying the letters was for them to remain in northwest Philadelphia, he said. Historic Germantown will scan the letters for its digital archive before exhibiting and then storing them in acid-free folders and boxes. Curator Laura Keim says the originals will be accessible to researchers. James Butler notes that the Charlie Ross story illustrates the indeterminacy of history. He acknowledges that there must be a logical explanation for how the kidnappers' letters ended up in a Mount Airy basement. Something did happen and there is a solution, he says. But damned if we are ever going to know what it is. electromagnetic forces. Oakland's runway 27, from which Amelia Earhart flew to Hawaii in the 1930s, is now called runway 28. The number comes from taking the runway's magnetic compass direction between 0 and 360, rounding to the nearest 10, and then taking out the 0. If a runway's direction changes by more than 5 degrees, the FAA requires it be renumbered. Andrew Alden explains why the Earth's magnetic field changes. The Earth's magnetic field arises from its own substance as the huge body of molten iron in its core stirs with the Earth's rotation and the Moon's steadying hand. Electrical currents in the iron generate magnetic fields that struggle against the stirring, acting like a natural turbine and powering the magnetism that draws our compass needles to attention. This sounds busy, and it is. The geomagnetic poles, north and south, are always wandering and must be closely monitored by a network of observatories to keep navigation accurate. As the Earth's magnetic North Pole wanders from its geographic North Pole, its magnetic field also changes in different ways for different parts of the world, and it's difficult to predict where the field will shift enough to make a difference for airports. In the past few years, Stansted Airport in London and a handful of airports in Florida, including Tampa's, have also had to renumber their runways. South Poles. This has happened hundreds of times in the Earth's history. The last time was 780,000 years ago. It's hard to say exactly what will happen. We humans have never lived through one, but it will definitely affect more than runway signage. It's not an uncommon sight in the Alps either. In Switzerland, insurance that covers helicopter evacuation for your family also includes your cows. But this is not just about the Swiss being quaint. That cow flying through the air is the result of a complex calculation involving limited resources, economic forces and compassion, writes Veronica Greenwood in Eon magazine. So Switzerland treats its cows so well because it is such a small country? Bear with us for a minute. The proximity of cities and farms means that for the Swiss, cows are not some abstract commodity existing in the great food production system. They are less comfortable with inhumane treatment. Further, the country's small size means that agriculture and ecosystem management go hand in hand. An injured cow cannot be left to die and rot, where it will pollute the drinking water of a nearby village, for example. Land made barren by indiscriminate farming practices cannot be abandoned and replaced by moving further west. The United States, in its vastness, once had this luxury. But as populations grow and space runs out, we need to rethink our relationship with the land. Look carefully, writes Greenwood about the flying cow. This could be a postcard from the future. And if you'd like to see the flying cow, just visit the show notes at www.origins.info, click on the link to this article in episode 84 of the Mysteries Abound podcast show notes, have a look at it. A little cow in a harness. Can't see the helicopter though. Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered why other animals are covered in hair all over their body, and we're not? We only have it in certain places? Well, this could be the reason. From the www.dailymail.co.uk website, an article by Damien Gale. Humans evolved after a female chimpanzee mated with a pig, is the extraordinary claim made by an American geneticist. The human species began as the hybrid offspring of a male pig and a female chimpanzee, an American geneticist has suggested. The startling claim has been made by Eugene McCarthy, who is also one of the world's leading authorities on hybridization in animals. He points out that while humans have many features in common with chimps, we also have a large number of distinguishing characteristics not found in any other primates. Dr. McCarthy sees these divergent characteristics as most likely the result of a hybrid origin at some point far back in human evolutionary history. What's more, he suggests, there is one animal that has all the traits which distinguish humans from our primate cousins in the animal kingdom. What is this other animal that has all these traits? He asks rhetorically. The answer is sus scrofa, the ordinary pig. Dr. McCarthy elaborates his astonishing hypothesis in an article on macroevolution.net, a website he curates. He is at pains to point out that it is merely a hypothesis, but he presents compelling evidence to support it. Scientists currently suppose that chimpanzees are humans' closest living evolutionary relatives, a theory amply backed by genetic evidence. However, as Dr. McCarthy points out, despite this genetic similarity, there are a massive number of divergent anatomical characteristics distinguishing the two species. These distinguishing characteristics, including hairless skin, a thick layer of subcutaneous fat, light-coloured eyes, protruding noses and heavy eyelashes, to name but a few, are unmistakably porcine, he suggests. There are also a number of less obvious but equally inexplicable similarities between humans and pigs in the structure of the skin and organs. Indeed, pigskin tissues and heart valves can be used in medicine because of their similarity and compatibility with the human body. Dr. McCarthy says the original pig-chimp hookup was probably followed by several generations of back-crossing, where the offspring of that pairing lived among chimps and mated with them, becoming more like chimps and less like pigs with every new generation. This also helps to explain the problem of relative infertility in hybrids. Dr. McCarthy points out that the belief that all hybrids are sterile is in fact false, and in many cases hybrid animals are able to breed with mates of the same species of either parent. After several generations, the hybrid strain would have become fertile enough to breed amongst themselves, Dr. McCarthy says. Unsurprisingly, Dr. McCarthy's hypothesis has come in for substantial criticism from orthodox evolutionary biologists and their creationist opponents alike. One important criticism, which dubs his theory the monkey effing a pig hypothesis, is that there is little chance that pigs and chimps could be interfertile. The two orders of creatures, according to evolutionary theory, diverged about 80 million years ago, as Science Blog's post points out. Just the gradual accumulation of molecular differences in sperm and egg recognition proteins would mean that pig sperm wouldn't recognise a chimpanzee egg as a reasonable target for fusion, P.Z. Myers writes. Furthermore, the blogger explains, while chimps have 48 chromosomes, pigs just have 38. He adds, hybridising a pig and a chimp is like taking half the dancers from a performance of Swan Lake and the other half from a performance of Giselle and throwing them together on a stage to assemble something. It's going to be a catastrophe. Finally, he suggests rather impudently that Dr. McCarthy do the experimental work himself and try mating with the pig to see how far he gets. But Dr. McCarthy believes that in the case of humans and other creatures, his hybrid modification to evolutionary theory can account for a range of phenomena that Darwinian evolution alone has difficulty explaining. Despite the opinions of some peer reviewers that Dr. McCarthy's work presents a potentially paradigm-shifting new take on conventional views of the origins of new life forms, he has had difficulty finding a publisher, so he has chosen to publish a book-length manuscript outlining his ideas on his website. In its conclusion he writes, "I must admit that I initially felt a certain amount of repugnance at the idea of being a hybrid. The image of a pig mating with an ape is not a pretty one, nor is that of a horde of monstrous half-humans breeding in a hybrid swarm. But the way we came to be is not so important as the fact that we now exist. As every Machiavellian knows, good things can emerge from ugly processes, and I think the human race is a very good thing. Moreover, there is something to be said for the idea of having the pig as a relative. My opinion of this animal has much improved during the course of my research. Where once I thought of filth and greed, I now think of intelligence, affection, loyalty, and adaptability, with an added touch of joyous sensuality, qualities without which humans would not be human." And dear listeners, I don't know whether this thought occurred to you, as it did to me when I was reading this article, but does that mean now that I have cannibalistic tendencies every time I have a ham sandwich or bacon and eggs for breakfast? Oh, something to think about. And from the www.smithsonianmag.com website, an article by Neil Baldwin. There's a 1,200-year-old phone in the Smithsonian collections. As a nomadic cultural historian, my subjects have led me in wildly different directions. I spent every Friday for 5 years in a dim, dusty reading room in West Orange, New Jersey, formerly a laboratory on the second floor of Thomas Edison's headquarters, deciphering the blunt-penciled scrawls of the celebrated inventor. 2 years after my biography of Edison appeared, I found myself labouring up vertiginous stairs at daybreak in Mexico, photographing the faded ochre outlines of winged snakes etched into stone temples at the vast ruins of Teotihuacan. The daunting treks led to a book on Mesoamerican myth, Legends of the Plumed Serpent. These two disparate worlds somehow collided unexpectedly on a recent afternoon in the hushed, temperature-controlled precincts of the National Museum of the American Indian Storage Facility in Suitland, Maryland. There, staffers pushing a rolling cart ushered one of the museum's greatest treasures into the high-ceilinged room. Nestled in an acid-free corrugated cardboard container was the earliest known example of telephone technology in the Western Hemisphere, evoking a lost civilization and the anonymous ancient techie who dreamed it up. The gourd and twine device, created 1200 to 1400 years ago, remains tantalizingly functional and too fragile to test out. This is unique, NMAI curator Ramiro Matos, an anthropologist and archaeologist who specialises in the study of the Central Andes, tells me. Only one has ever been discovered. It comes from the consciousness of an indigenous society with no written language. We'll never know the trial and error that went into its creation, the marvel of acoustic engineering, cunningly constructed of two resin-coated gourd receivers, each 3 1/2 inches long, stretched hide membranes stitched around the bases of the receivers, and the cotton twine cord, extending 75 feet when pulled taut, arose out of the Chimu Empire at its height. The dazzlingly innovative culture was centred in the Rio Moche Valley in northern Peru, wedged between the Pacific Ocean and the Western Andes. The Chimu were a skillful, inventive people, Matos tells me, and we don sterile gloves and peer into the hollowed interiors of the gourds. The Chimu, Matos explains, were the first true engineering society in the New World, known as much for their artisanry and metalwork as for the hydraulic and canal irrigation system they introduced, transforming desert into agricultural lands. The artefact's recent past is equally mysterious. Somehow, no one knows under what circumstances, it came into the hands of a Prussian aristocrat, Baron Walram V. von Stoller, a shadowy Indiana Jones-type adventurer. Von Stoller began excavating in Peru during the 1930s. He developed the digging bug, as he told the New York Times in 1937, at the age of 6, when he stumbled across evidence of a prehistoric village on the grounds of his father's castle in Germany. Von Stoller himself may have unearthed the gourd telephone. By the 1940s he had settled in New York City and amassed extensive holdings of South American ethnographic objects, eventually dispersing his collections to museums around the United States. The sophisticated culture was eclipsed when the Inca emperor conquered the Chimu king around 1470. During its heyday, the urban centre of Chanchan was the largest adobe metropolis in pre-Columbian America. The central nucleus covered 2.3 square miles. Today, the angular contours of 10 immense compounds, once surrounded by thick 30-foot-high walls, are visible. The compounds, erected successively by 10 Chimu kings, were subdivided into labyrinths of corridors, kitchens, courtyard gardens, wells, burial sites, supply rooms, and residential and administrative chambers. Like the Inca, Matos says, the Chimu were organised as a top-down society. This instrument would have been made only for and used by a member of the elite, perhaps a priest. Walls within walls and secluded apartments in the compounds preserved stratification between the ruling elite and the middle and working classes. The NMAI telephone, Matos says, was a tool designed for an executive level of communication, perhaps for a courtier-like assistant required to speak into a gourd mouthpiece from an anteroom, forbidden face-to-face contact with a superior, conscious of status and of security concerns. Contemplating the brainstorm that led to the Chimu telephone, a eureka moment undocumented for posterity summons up its 21st century equivalent. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs strode onto a stage at the Moscone Center in San Francisco and announced, "This is the day I have been looking forward to for 2.5 years." As he swiped the touchscreen of the iPhone, it was clear that the paradigm in communication technology had shifted. The unsung Edison of the Chimu must have experienced an equivalent incandescent exhilaration when his or her device first transmitted sound from chamber to chamber. And if you'd like to see a photograph of the telephone, visit the show notes, click on the link in episode 84. It's quite an interesting device. From the www.theepochtimes.com. Are birthmarks connected to violent death in the past? An old woman in Thailand with the wish to reincarnate as a boy. Her daughter dipped a finger in white paste and marked the back of the woman's neck with the paste. Not long after the woman's death, the daughter gave birth to a son with a white mark on the back of his neck that mirrored the white paste left on the woman's neck. When the boy became old enough to talk, he would claim possession of things that belonged to his grandmother, as though they'd always been his. This is one of the many cases recounted by Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia in which birthmarks seem to relate to past lives. The late Dr. Ian Stevenson, whose work Tucker continues, investigated 210 cases of children with birthmarks or defects that related to memories they retained from past lives. Stevenson obtained a post-mortem report in 49 cases. The wound and birthmark were within 10 square centimetres of each other on the body in 43% of these cases, and many were much closer to the same location. In some cultures, people mark the deceased with soot or paste to recognise them when they are reborn. Here are a few examples of birthmarks related to past life memories, studied by Stevenson. A boy born in India without fingers on his right hand remembered another life in which he was a boy who had his fingers amputated after sticking them in a fodder chopping machine. A boy in Turkey with a malformed right ear remembered having been shot and killed at close range on that side of his head. A boy named Maharam in India could remember being killed in a previous life with a shotgun fired at close range. He remembered enough details of his past life for Stevenson to find the autopsy report of the man supposedly reincarnated as Ram. The birthmarks on Ram's chest corresponded to the bullet wounds. Some anecdotal accounts of birthmarks from past lives that have not been verified are shared on a past life discussion blog post. Karen Kubiko posted photos of herself in high school with a birthmark on her neck and a photo of herself later in life without the birthmark. She said she remembered in 2011 that in a previous life she was a woman named Helen who was hit by a stray bullet in the neck and died in 1927. The mark was where the bullet had hit her in her vision. As she remembered this, the mark gradually disappeared. Another person on the blog said she had a birthmark on the back of her leg. She remembered a past life in which a snake bit her there. A few years later, she realised the birthmark had faded away. She said the area is not often exposed, so light exposure or other such external elements are not to blame. And whilst we're on a similar topic, also from the epochtimes.com, an article by Tara MacIsaac. Is this boy his own grandfather? And there's a short video and a photograph associated with this article. A little boy referred to in case studies as Sam showed convincing evidence that he is the reincarnation of his grandfather. Sam was 18 months old when his father was changing his diaper. Sam told his father, "When I was your age, I used to change your diaper." Dr. Jim B. Tucker at the Psychiatric Department of the University of Virginia explained Sam's story in a video posted on the university website. Tucker has explored 2,500 cases of children remembering their past lives. He explained that Sam made some startling statements while looking at an old photo album. Sam was 4 years old when his grandmother died. His father brought an old photo album home from her house when he cleaned it out. To Sam's parents' knowledge, Sam had never seen a photo of his grandmother. When they were looking through the album, Sam pointed to a photo of a car and said, "That's my car." It was his grandfather's first car, one he'd been quite attached to. Sam's mother was sceptical, not predisposed to believe in reincarnation as a Baptist. She tested him. She showed him a photo of his grandfather as a young boy with other boys of the same age. Sam pointed to his grandfather and said, "There I am." She corrected him and said, "That's your grandfather." "No, that's me," he replied. Tucker said he looked at the photos and he would not have been able to tell which of the boys in the photo was the grandfather, having seen other photos of the grandfather. Testing it further, Sam's mother asked if he remembered anything else from his past life. He said, "Someone turned my sister into a fish." "Who?" Sam's mother asked. "Bad men." The grandfather's sister had been murdered and her corpse was dumped in a body of water. Sam's father said the boy would not have heard this story. Dr. Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic magazine, asked in the video, "How do we know these things actually happened?" He said Sam's case and the thousands of similar cases are based on anecdotes told by parents, and events can sometimes become distorted when told by an excited parent. Also, parents may influence the children in various ways. Tucker took parental enthusiasm into account, however. He recorded the initial attitude of parents and found no correlation between that attitude and what the children reported. Some children have given detailed reports of the locations they lived in previous lives. Visiting the sites, researchers have verified that people had recently died in the areas and that those people's lives fit the descriptions given by the children. The next three articles are probably best done from the show notes at www.origins.info because basically they're photos with a small amount of text associated with the article. The first is from the news.nstr.com. 15 most terrifying places on Earth you would not want to set foot in. Quite an interesting article sent in by one of our listeners. The second is from the facts.pm and it's called 10 Mysterious Places Abandoned by Humanity. Quite good photos and definitely worth a look. As an example, I'll just read out the text associated with the first photograph. A boy went to war in 1914 and left his bike chained to a tree. He never came home and the family left the bike there as a memorial to the fallen soldier. Vashon Island in Puget Sound, Washington State. Quite sad when you look at it and the memory associated with it. And the third article is from the dailymail.co.uk website. I'll read the text associated with it because it does tell the story, but if you'd like to have a look at the photographs, they really are quite interesting. And this is written by Becky Evans. Flight from Goussainville, inside the eerie French ghost town, abandoned 40 years ago by defiant inhabitants who refused to live underneath an airport flight path. It was once a thriving farming village where hundreds of people enjoyed rural French life. But the 144 families of Goussainville fled 40 years ago, turning the once picturesque village into a virtual ghost town. A combination of change and disaster sealed the fate of the tiny, historic village. Villagers were driven away in droves by the constant air traffic streaming from the Charles de Gaulle airport. Set just 12 miles north of Paris, residents were inundated with continual noise, with dozens of planes flying low over the village as the planes took off and landed. The town was now so close to the country's largest airport in neighbouring Roissy that the noise from low-flying planes became unbearable to live with. Residents of the old village watched as neighbours deserted their homes, trying to seek a quieter life. And they fled even without selling their homes, which were left standing empty. However, irritation turned to tragedy when a Concorde prototype plane crashed into the village in 1973. The supersonic craft crashed during the Paris Air Show, killing all 6 people on board. 8 others were killed on the ground. The plane destroyed several buildings, as well as a school, which was fortunately empty at the time. By the end of the year, the last of the 200 Goussainville had left. Today, just a handful of families live among the dilapidated ruins. The beautiful 14th century Église Saint-Pierre et Saint-Paul church, which is classified as an historic monument, is one of the few buildings to have withstood the neglect. Elsewhere, rustic buildings lie shuttered, and buyers for the homes under the flight path still cannot be found. Once majestic homes have been left to the elements and stand overgrown and dilapidated. Despite the town's proximity to the French capital, it seems no one wants to live in Goussainville. Have you ever taken a stroll through a wood and felt that you were being watched? Yet when you turn around, no one is there. You carry on with your walk, but that feeling of disquiet lingers. Perhaps you were being watched by something almost as disquieting as that galloping mad axe murderer you were dreading. The doll's eye plant could be eyeing you up as you innocently ramble. In North America, not just the hills have eyes. From the www.curiositas.com website, the doll's eyes plant. The woods have eyes too. And to make the most of this story, it would be a good idea to visit the show notes, because there are many photographs of the doll's eye plant associated with it. The text will stand on its own, but the photographs are quite good and shows the creepiness of this plant. This plant gives the saying, "eyes on stalks," a whole new meaning. It looks as if some Hannibal of the hinterland has been preparing his evening meal. Eye kebab, no doubt washed down with a nice Chianti. Yet the common name for this plant makes no reference to these eyes being human, which is all very well unless you are a pedophobe and have a fear of dolls. The doll's eyes, also known as the white baneberry, is native to eastern North America and often grows to 2 feet tall. Although it looks unremarkable for most of its life cycle, when it produces its berries, which ripen over the summer, it takes on this rather sinister look. The berries last until the first frost, and of course give the plant its popular name. The black spot, we should call it the pupil perhaps, is a residual scar created by the stigma of the plant's flowers earlier in the year. It is perhaps just as well that the appearance of these berries may discourage someone who otherwise might be tempted to taste this fruit of the forest. If ingested in any quantity, they would quickly provoke a heart attack, such is the power and speed of their poison. However, birds are unaffected, and this is how the seeds are spread throughout the woodlands. Skilled herbalists, however, can produce a medicine from the plant which is beneficial in the treatment of pain and bronchial complaints. If you eat them raw, however, your cardiac muscles will quickly become sedated, and you know what happens when your heart stops beating. So if you go down to the woods today, you may be in for a big surprise. Yet as much as the eyes of this plant seem to follow your every move, silently tracking your progress through the forest, leave them be. If you decide to imitate Mr. Lecter and feed on these white and wide-eyed treats, then you will be the victim, not the cannibal. Any anthropophagic urges are to be resisted. When I had my dog Rex, one of our favourite things was to go for the old walk every afternoon. And Rex, without fail, would always manage to poop 1, 2, or 3 times during the walk, no matter what time of the day. I found this amazing at times, and most of the time irritating really though. But I just read this article from the discovermagazine.com website. And did you know that when you take your dog for a walk, dogs align themselves to the Earth's magnetic field when pooping? And this is an article by Brianna Draxler. Dogs seem to do their business wherever they feel like it, sometimes in very unfortunate places like neighbours' yards or kids' sandboxes. But scientists now say it isn't random. Dogs actually align themselves with the Earth's magnetic field before dropping a duty. An ability to sense the orientation of the Earth's magnetic field has been detected in migratory animals such as birds and whales and bees. They are thought to use it for navigation. But this study is to find such magnetosensitivity in dogs. The researchers spent 2 years gathering the necessary data, that is, watching 5,582 pee breaks and 1,893 defecation stops in Germany and the Czech Republic. After ruling out the influence of wind, time of day and sun angle, the researchers found that the only factor that played a role in determining how and where the dogs pooped a squat was the Earth's magnetic field. When the field was stable, dogs preferred to squat along the north-south axis and actively avoided the east-west axis. That's without the influence of leashes, fire hydrants or fences. The researchers don't know if the 70 dogs in the study actually felt the magnetic pull, according to the paper published in Frontiers in Zoology. But the scientists base their conclusion on the fact that during periods of instability in the Earth's magnetic field, when the Sun's magnetic field and solar winds vary its orientation, the dogs no longer showed a preference for the north-south axis. So next time you take Vito for a walk, bring a compass and see if the results hold true. And of course there's the opposite. If you're going for a walk with your dog and get lost and don't have a compass, wait for him to have a poop and you'll know where north-south is. Hopefully. And from the creepypasta.com website, an article by Hollow Eyes. The Rift. Many children have irrational fears. The dark monsters in the closet or under beds, hearing strange noises from the attic. These are all examples of the types of fears that we usually dismiss as irrational, because they do not have any real reason to be feared. And thus we tell our children to ignore their fears and tell them not to trust their senses, because sometimes the mind can be deceiving. But what originally inspired these fears? Is it really as simple as a fear of the unknown? If so many children around the world talk of the same experiences and experience the same fears, isn't it a little strange how nobody ever truly encounters the beings that are the source of this fear? Most people, that is. It began 6 years ago in the winter of 2007. I was 19 years of age and lived in the small town of Langport, Somerset. Like most people of my age, I had just finished college and was in search of a university that would allow me to study mechanical engineering. My mother had suggested that I should attend a local university and live with her for a few more years to avoid the living expenses and need to travel. But the truth is, living with my two brothers makes it very difficult for me when it comes to studying, as the house is always in utter chaos. In all honesty, I could not wait to leave this house and live independently away from all the strife, where I could actually study in peace. I had applied for several universities and had been accepted by two. The closest of the two was the University of Bristol, which was supposed to be the third best university for mechanical engineering in the country. Of course, I was incredibly happy that I had been accepted into such a high-standard university. But I had not yet told my mother of the news in case she took it the wrong way. Maybe she would think that I didn't love her or need her anymore. I was contemplating how I should break the news to her, but I foolishly left my letter of acceptance on the table in the dining room. She had read it before I had even managed to tell her that I was leaving. She called me downstairs from my room where I was studying, and I bolted quickly down the stairs to meet her. She stood, letter clutched to her chest with tears rolling down her face. She had taken it badly. I braced myself for the onset of guilt that I would feel if she broke down in front of me because I was leaving her. However, no such event occurred. Instead, she wrapped her arms around my shoulders and hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears still rolling down her face as she let me go. Relief washed over me as I realised that she wasn't upset that I was leaving. She had even offered to drive me with all of my things to my new rented house in Bristol, where I would continue to live for the next few years while I studied at the university. I will never forget how supportive she had been with me, but sometimes I wish she hadn't. Maybe if she had begged me to go to a local university, I would have stayed. Maybe it would have been possible to avoid the horrors that I experienced while living there. My brothers warned me that I would get nervous and would be likely to panic once things became real. I would feel isolated and alone and immediately dread making this decision. However, I did not feel this at all, at least not until I was outside the front door of my new house. The door was made of some kind of dark, heavy wood, which appeared to be rotting at the bottom due to years of rainfall barraging the doorway. The house itself was not much to look at either. The walls were made of old grey stone, and it seemed that my street was the only street without renovated buildings. It may have just been my imagination, but as I stood there and glanced up at the tall structure, it seemed to loom over me. In all honesty, it intimidated me. But I could not complain as the price of rent was cheap. £35 per week wasn't much to pay in the grand scheme of things. I turned to my mother and explained to her that I had feelings of uncertainty about living away from home. She smiled and brushed my hair away from my eyes as she used to do when I was a small child, and simply said, "You will be fine." I had always found her soft grey eyes comforting and her voice reassuring. I gave her one last hug and she drove off into the distance. I unlocked the door and entered the house. 2 weeks had passed since my enrolment in the University of Bristol. Aside from feeling slightly lonely, everything was fine. Most of the day I spent either studying or on my laptop talking to friends from my old college on video chat. Although it had only been 2 weeks, seeing familiar faces comforted me greatly. But as I spent many hours studying from a textbook, I could not help but notice the eerie silence of the house. The streets outside of my window were usually completely vacant, and it was rare to even hear the sound of birds overhead. Many times I would turn the laptop on just to hear the low, gentle hum of the fans as they whirred inside of the machine. Anything to break the silence. There was also a rather large crack in one of the walls in my bedroom, and despite how silly it may sound, I could never shake the feeling that I was being watched whilst I slept. Although the walls were fairly thin, the crack appeared to be a few feet deep. I could not explain it at the time, but something about the dark abyss that peered out instilled a fear into me that I had not felt since I was a child. The crack had bothered me so much that I decided to board it up with wood so it was no longer visible. That's when it started. Ever since the night I had decided to board up the crack in the wall, I have heard strange things coming from inside of the wall. I laid in bed facing opposite the boarded wall and heard scratching coming from the other side. At first I assumed it was mice and made a mental note to set up some mouse traps around the house. But the longer I left it, the louder the scratches became. On the first night, a tiny scraping noise every few seconds, like the paws of a small animal. It was fairly easy to ignore and sleep through, as I am usually quite a heavy sleeper. Then the scratches intensified until the point where it sounded as if somebody was digging a knife into the stone brick and scraping it down in an attempt to break free. This was causing me to lose sleep, and as I was attending university 5 days a week, it was having quite an effect on my performance. Some nights I would have a mere 3 hours of sleep because of the incident with the wall. I had reported it to the council in the hope that they would fix it, but they said that the closest they could come and take a look at it would be the following month. I didn't have time to wait that long, but I didn't have to. Or so I thought. After a week of the noises persisting every night, they had suddenly ceased. However, they were replaced by low groans and rumbles from the other side of the wall. This was not normal. I recognised this, and so I called my mother. I had explained the situation to her, and she had told me that it was probably just auditory hallucinations as I was falling asleep. Apparently I would hear all sorts of things as a child, and it was quite common for me to hallucinate as I was going to sleep and in a strange environment. It was likely that they would start again because I was in an unfamiliar place. From then on, every time I heard the groans, I told myself that they were not real. I told myself that it was all in my head, and that all I needed to do was ignore it. To my surprise, it worked. Perhaps my mother was right. Perhaps it was all just because I was anxious about being isolated and living in a new environment and everything. But that does not explain the events that would follow. 2 months had passed since I first moved into the house, and I had begun to establish relationships with other students in my class. I had 3 new friends and a girlfriend named Sarah. She had fair blonde hair that flowed down to her shoulders, almost like water, and her emerald green eyes always sparkled. I had forgotten about the crack in the wall and considered it part of a silly phase I was going through. I can truly say I was happy. My life was peaceful. I had the perfect girlfriend, the perfect friends, and my grades were of the highest standards. But slowly, everything began to go wrong. I lost everything. My perfect girlfriend, my perfect friends, and the rest of my life. And the worst part is, it was all over a stupid kiss. Just a kiss. I had discovered that Sarah was cheating on me. I found this out when I had walked over to her house and saw my best friend making out with her on the couch, but they had not seen me. At the time, this meant everything to me. I could have sworn back then that my heart had split in two, though there was no sound. I left without saying a word and shut myself away from the outside world. I didn't turn up to class for the following week and instead sat in my room cursing her for what she had done to me. I checked my phone, 5 missed calls, all from Sarah. I threw my phone at the wall and let out a scream of anger as it smashed to pieces against the boards that covered the crack. That's when the hallucinations started again, only this time they were visual. I spent most of my time wrapped up in a ball in my bedsheets. All I could think about was how Sarah had betrayed me. Nothing else mattered to me anymore. You may think that it is kind of pathetic to be so worked up about such a short-lasted relationship, but it was the first real bond of affection I had made in a long time. My dreams were focused on us getting back together, with scenes such as taking a romantic walk with her alongside a beach. But each time I would wake up even angrier and curse her even more, until one night I woke to the sound of wood splitting with ferocious force. I turned my head towards whatever had made the sound, but I could not move my body. I was paralyzed. I began to panic as thoughts raced through my mind. The only thing in here that could have made the sound was the wood that I used to board up the crack. Something had broken it. Something had gotten out. I heard the all too familiar groan of whatever it was that had broken out of the crack in the wall. only this time it was at the bottom of my bed. A hand reached up, and some kind of creature began pulling itself up with my bed covers. The hand had only 3 digits, and each one was equipped with an incredibly sharp claw that tore at my bed sheets. My heart was in my mouth. Whatever this thing was, it was certainly not an hallucination. The creature came into full view as it climbed onto my chest. Its skin was almost entirely grey, and it had long black matted hair which hung down by the side of its face. The creature gazed straight into my soul, with eyes as black as coal, and tears of blood began to fall down its cheeks. It opened its mouth and revealed a pit darker than the rift that had disturbed me so much beforehand, and spoke in half-formed sentences. "Your desires." Its voice was rough and was comparable to the sound of shattering glass. The creature pointed to the rift in the wall and turned my head towards it. The creature hopped over to the rift on all fours and began to haul something out of it. Through the darkness I could make out a humanoid form, though it was limp and lifeless. A single clean cut had been slashed across the neck of the body, and the clothes were stained with blood. I caught a glimmer of gold as the creature dropped the body to the floor. My body was filled with dread. It was Sarah. The creature saw the fear in my eyes and began to laugh in a mocking tone. I willed my body to move with all my strength, but I could not. The creature took its claw and dug deep into the eye socket of the girl and began to twist violently. I could see spurts of blood shoot out from the socket as it began to feast on her eyes. The stench of rotting flesh filled my nostrils and caused me to sit upright to vomit. But at least I could move now. I dashed across the room and tackled the creature to the ground, but its skin was too slimy for me to hold on to. It took a slash at my face and drew blood from my cheek. I lunged at the creature once again, but it disappeared through the crack with a blood-curdling screech. I collapsed to the floor. The heavy cloth of darkness enveloped me. The police found us after Sarah was reported as missing by her friends. I was huddled over her corpse with the eye sockets hollowed out when they detained me. Of course they did not believe my story, and I really can't say that I blame them. I was branded as insane and sentenced to life imprisonment for first-degree murder. My friends, my family, they all think I am a psychopath. I've had countless therapists try to tell me that whatever that creature was, it did not exist, that it was all in my head. They tell me that I did it out of anger because she cheated on me. But I would never do such a thing. I know what I saw. I know that whatever killed Sarah is still out there. And most of all, I know that it is real. The music for today's podcast came from the musicalley.com website. The bandwidth is provided by TalkShoe at www.talkshoe.com. And remember, we have a Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Paul Rexy, where you can find out about updates to the podcast and other stuff like that. The show notes are held at the Origins podcast website, www.origins.info. And remember, Origins is spelled Originz. And I'd like to say a big thank you to these people who have given me a donation since the last Mysteries Abound podcast, which was a little while ago. Your help and support is greatly appreciated, and all monies go towards the upkeep of the podcast. Sean Yarnell, John Devine, Chad Simmons, Bjarni Gudmundsson, I hope I said that right, David Birch, Kelly Reamston, Sky Norton, Pierre Edvardson, Estiel Glass, Angela Hill, Robert Sieg and Clement Tanaka. Your support is greatly appreciated, everyone. And if you don't visit the Facebook page to find out why I'm so slow at the moment in producing podcasts, it all has to do with me being homeless. We sold in November our home of 23 years and are currently looking for a new one. At the moment we're staying with a friend, and it's not often that I get time to sit down and produce a show when no one's here to disturb me. Today I have. This podcast was actually started on the 18th of December, and today is the 5th of January, and I finally got a chance to finish it. If you're wondering why there's a bit of a hissing sound in the background today for the podcast, it's all to do with the really hot weather we're experiencing here in Brisbane at the moment, and this hissing sound is made by the cicadas in the tree surrounding the yard. It's nothing to do with my microphone playing up. So until next time, everyone, whenever that may be, maybe I'll have a new home, maybe I won't. This is Paul saying thank you everyone for your support, and bye for now.